at the early part of the worship service, and then the closing hymn is going to actually reflect turning your eyes upon Jesus, and you're going to hear from Colin as to why. Here you go, brother. Put it on right here, and you're all set.
All right. Like that, right?
Yeah, just do it wherever you want.
Okay. I'll hold that. Thank you, Doug. And our passage today is Hebrews 11. There's a little tract I like. I don't know if you're familiar with it. It's called Then What? And it goes like this. These guys are on a bus, on a train. One guy says, well, I've had my eye on the... Oh, let's see, I'm sorry. It started, it's wrong. Oh, it says, hey, I'm going back to school, finishing my degree. The other guy says, great. Then what? Well, I've had my eye on the president's job ever since I came to this company. You never know. Woo-woo, then what? Well, with all the dough I'll be making, it'd be a cinch to marry a beauty queen and build a mansion. Ooh, boy, then what? Why, we'd have some perfect children, and we'd send them to the best schools and take expensive vacations. Perfect. Then what? Oh, then I suppose after a while I'd ease into retirement, spoil the grandkids, travel the world, to do the grandpa bit. Sounds like fun. Then what? What do you mean, then what? I'd die, I guess, and everyone would come to my funeral and say what a great guy I was. Then what? Then what? Then what? He gets mad. Well, it's very typical. And contrasting that with the Christian, it's the opposite. The Christian has something to look forward to. He has a home in glory. He has a God that he believes in and that he obeys. And we see that in this passage today with Abraham. He knew his God. He believed in his God. He had faith in his God, and he obeyed him. And that same God comes to us today. And we're the children of Abraham. And therefore, just as Abraham did, we trust. We have faith in that same God, and we obey that same God. So it's a pretty easy outline. It's the Christian lives by faith, and that faith results in obedience. If that's too hard for you to memorize, we can just learn trust and obey, like the good song says. So the first thing we want to consider is that the Christian lives by faith. Christians have faith. We read about this faith in this passage of Hebrews. And any Christian, we Christians today have the same faith that these people have. And that faith is in the true God, the living God, the Jehovah God, the God of the Bible, the God of the universe. That's our object. Faith has to have an object. It's so silly. I go into the stores, and I went into the store the other day. It says, believe. And I've heard at least 2 Christmas songs that says, believe. You gotta believe. Well, if you believe, you gotta believe in something or someone. You have to have an object. As Doug has said before, if we have if there's a rotten chair, it's a wooden chair, it's rotten, but I believe it's going to hold me up, and I know it's going to hold me up, and I have faith. It doesn't matter how much faith I have. If that chair is rotten, I'm going to hit the ground. It's not a matter of how much faith, it's the object of my faith. Well, Abraham, and we had our object is this great God of the Bible. The apostle enlarges more on Abraham and his faith than all the others in this chapter. Abraham is the father of believers, and he probably, when he lived with his father in his home, he worshipped other gods, or they had superstition and idolatry. But Abraham's faith is evident that he left. It says he left his country, he left his family, he left his father's house, and went into another country he didn't even know where he was going. That's faith. And so he had that same faith in that true God. And that faith perseveres. We see it here, even when there are obstacles. Sarah, 90 years old. Abraham, 99 years old. And she had always been barren. And yet she was told she was going to have a son. And she says, yeah, right. And her faith shook. But she took her eyes off of the promise and put them on the promiser. And then her faith prevailed. The same with Abraham in offering up Isaac. You remember Gideon, that great army of Midian, and the Lord narrowed it down to 22,000, and Gideon says, no way. And the Lord says, yeah, you're right, no way, but for different reasons. Gideon was, no way, that's too small an army. The Lord says, no way, that's too big an army. It's got to go smaller. So it gets down to 300, and Gideon is breathless. And not only 300, but look at the weapons, torches in a picture. Now that takes some faith. Those were some real obstacles. I mean, it's easy to sit here and read about Gideon, but put yourself in Gideon's sandals, and when he hears 300 against that. But he took his eyes off the promise, and he put them on the promiser, and that makes a difference. So the Christian lives by his faith. He trusts in that true God, and another thing. He believes in an eternal rest with God in heaven. Because of that, he realizes he's a pilgrim on this earth, a stranger, a foreigner. Abraham roved around the country. He was a pilgrim. He lived in. It said he sojourned. He lived in tents which were pitched, erected with cords and stakes. The next verse, it talks about a habitation with foundation. But he lived in tents. But he looked forward to that habitation that had foundations. What a beautiful thing. All these people here realized that they were here just for a short while. What a difference that makes. If a woman is in a hotel for one night, she doesn't say, wow, let's see, I wonder how a picture would be right there, and I wonder if we could get a rug this color and paint the walls this color. No, she's there just for a night. Now her home, that's a different thing. Well, our home is not this world. But we act as if it were. Wow, we plan, we get wrapped up. And our home is that we need to grasp things loosely. We're pilgrims. This world is not my home, says the hymn. And another thing, along with that, we believe, the believer believes in an eternal rest with God in heaven. He looks forward. Abraham looked forward, and I love this verse 16. It says they looked forward, longing longing for that country. It says instead they were longing for a better country. Looking forward. Boy, if we really looked forward like we're supposed to as Christians, boy, our lives would be turned upside down. Just in millions of ways. So just think, if we really look forward, if someone really looks forward, they probably aren't going to spend 10 hours a day at the gym building those muscles. You can tell I'm not guilty of that sin. I like to, but anything, beauty just goes. No one cares. Someone else comes along. Everything's passing. Boy, I guess no one likes to get old, but there are some people that really take it. I know a couple gals who, well, boy, their birthday came and they really freaked out. It was a terrible thing. Wow, I'm getting old. Well, if we looked forward, think of all the things that would change. Another thing, if we really looked forward, our trials would lessen. If we had our eyes fixed on eternal things, the things that count, we can get cancer, and it's hard. No one's saying it's easy. We get all the bad things in life, but it makes a difference. That the Bible in Corinthians talks about momentary and light afflictions. If not, they're very, very heavy. But if we're looking forward, who cares? In fact, it's better for me to go on. I remember Dad, when he had this stroke, he says, they wanted to give him pills, and he says, no, he didn't want those pills. They hindered him on his way to heaven. but if we look forward, what a change in our lives it would be. And the world doesn't have that. They say you go around once and you got to grab up all the gusto you can. I remember a few years ago, this gal Peggy Lee sang a song. She says, "If that's all there is, then let's keep dancing. Bring out the booze, and let's have a ball. If that's all there is." See, if life just finishes here and there's nothing after, they're right. We're the dumb ones. Let's keep dancing. There's nothing. But you stop. If they were to stop to think for a minute, they would be miserable. They would be depressed. It's a terrible thing to think of. Wow, I'm living this life, which is everything passes, nothing's. And then after that I die, and after that the judgment, and after that eternity in hell. Boy, you know how they solve that problem? That they just don't think. To get away from that, just don't think. That's why people get involved in work or in their house or their car or in some cause or they get involved in sports or something. Just stay busy so I don't think, because as long as I don't think, I'm okay. But if I think, I'm done for. That's the way the guy in the tract was. Remember, he loved talking about his position, his vacation, and all that. But don't talk to me about death, and they get very, very upset. But we look forward. We don't look at this. We look forward. And I was thinking, it's amazing how much the Bible speaks about looking. It says, "Look unto me, all ye ends of the earth, for I am God, there is none else." Look. So look to the serpent, which represented Christ. Look to Christ. Or remember Peter walking on the water. When he took his eyes off of Jesus, he sank. Hebrews talks about looking unto Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith. Corinthians, fix your eyes on the eternal things. A lot about looking, and a look is a powerful thing. I don't know who, maybe it was Billy Graham, who said, in regard to temptation, he says, it's the second look that gives you problems, something on that order. But see, once you fix your eyes on something, boy, that draws you in, it lures you. You get more and more involved in that thing. Whether it's temptation, then we, on the other hand, if we're looking, like Abraham, looking forward to that eternal rest, if we fix our eyes on those things, then, well, the song says, turn your eyes upon Jesus, look full in His wonderful face, and the things of earth will grow strangely dim. Well, if we have our eyes fixed on the world, then the things of heaven grow strangely dim, and the things of earth grow very bright. It depends on what we're looking at. So what we have to do is be careful of what we're looking at. Check ourselves. What are we looking at? Faith is something you exercise. It doesn't just come automatically. I remember Lloyd Jones saying, so many people think faith is automatic. It's like these thermostats. You use the water in your water heater, and then it gets cold, so the thermostat has to come into operation and warm the water up. And people think faith is like that. Faith is something you exercise, he says. It's something you bring into operation. It doesn't just happen automatically. We have to be careful, guard ourselves about what we're looking at. Well, what does that mean? Look. Well, one way we look is coming to church. We think on spiritual things, eternal. We read the Bible. We meditate. We think. We look and we down through the ages, the saints have, all my trials, Lord, soon be o'er, and they look, and we look, and we keep looking. So the believer lives by faith. And in case you're getting scared, I won't take as long on the second point, which is we've talked about the believer and his faith. Well, that faith results in obedience. And that's the second thing we want to trust and obey. If there's faith, there's obedience. If there's faith, there's works. Faith without works is dead. If there's fire, there's heat. If a baby is born, it cries. Faith produces obedience. Now, we aren't saved because of our works, but we aren't saved without them either, says Spurgeon. I heard one time about Professor Machen. A student says, well, Professor, isn't it true that you have to have both faith and works? It's like the rowboat, this oar is faith and this oar is works, and if you just row with this one, you go around in circles. If you just row with this one, you go around in circles too. So you got to pull with both. You got to have both faith and works. And Machen says, well, that's a nice illustration if you're going to heaven in a rowboat. I guess the student was emphasizing the works and the faith and forgetting about God's grace or something like that. But we're saved by grace through faith and unto good works. Well, just a couple things about the obedience. We obey because God has a right to command obedience. Why does He have a right? Because He's God. He's our Abraham wouldn't have obeyed, wouldn't have left his country to go in another country without knowing, had he not believed that God is God. God is sovereign. He's our maker. He's our preserver. He's our redeemer, our father. Whatever, He has an unquestioned right to everything we think, everything we say, everything, every part of our being. He has a right because He's God. He's our king. He's our ruler. He can decree whatever He wants. He can command whatever He wants. He can punish sin. He's God. And you know, a parent's authority is patterned after God's authority. And I hope I'm not going to step on corns or anything, but I have a strong belief. Well, you know, the typical thing. The parent tells the kid do something. The kid says, "Why?" And the parent says, "Because I said so." Well, you don't have to be ugly, but you do have to impress that point on that kid that you're the kid and I'm the parent with authority. And so God has a right. That He's God. The parent is the parent. And then obedience should be prompt. Delayed obedience is disobedience. If you wait 10 minutes, that's 10 minutes of disobedience. Again, I hope I don't step on talking about I used to live with an uncle who had two boys, two little brats, I might say, and one of the reasons that I felt was he says, "Davy, take out the garbage," or "Take out the garbage, please." And Davy wouldn't respond. He said, "Davy, did you hear me?" I said, "Take out the garbage." And Davy wouldn't respond. You go, 1, 2, 3. He had count to 10. And Davy, I knew when Davy would respond, he would respond at 9. Well, that's not obedience. That's delayed obedience, which is disobedience. Abraham obeyed right away. And lastly, obedience has to be from the heart. It's a noble thing, says Spurgeon. It's not the obedience of a slave or a horse or a dog. It's the obedience of a child. And if it's not cheerful obedience, it's not obedience from the heart, which consequently is of little worth before God. If someone obeys because they have to, well, if they're free, they would immediately become a rebel. So there's nothing in their obedience. As Spurgeon says, the obedience of faith comes from a principle within, not compulsion without. And so many, I'm thinking, you know, it's a matter of not of terror of the club. It's a matter of love. And I was thinking of this example. Suppose there's a single man who has a house, and he had a woman come and clean that house for him. And he gives her a list of stuff, and he goes off to work, and she does that list, and he pays her. Well, one day he falls in love with her, and he gets married, and he goes off to work, and his friend says, Did you leave that list for your wife?" He says, "Oh, no, are you kidding? I don't have to leave a list of 20 things. She'll do 60 things and keep going, because now it's not a matter of doing it for pay. She's not in the club. Now it's a matter of love. She does it because she loves me. I don't have to leave a list." And so obedience comes from it's love. It comes from the heart. And I'll close with this. People get wrapped up in rituals and religion and good outward motions, and forgetting that God searches our hearts. He searches our motives. And it reminds you this, I'm overlaying this with illustrations, I know, but this little boy, his father says, "Sit down, Johnny." And Johnny doesn't sit down. He says, "Did you hear me? I said, sit down." Johnny still doesn't sit down. So the father goes up to give him a whack, And Johnny sits down. He says, yeah, well, I might be sitting down on the inside, but I'm standing up on the outside. So obedience is not just an outward obeying. It comes from a principle within, not from compulsion without. So as we come to this new year, think of those people out there in the stores or wherever they are. Can you hear them? Can you see them running around? But let's keep dancing. But bring out the drink. Let's have a ball. Because this is all. If this is all there is, then what else? Let's just live it up. Think of our relatives. Think of people that they're like that. And when we are Christians and we have hope, we have something to look forward to. We don't appreciate it, and we take our eyes off those things, and we start living just like the world. We look at the world and we get drawn in, and we get wrapped up in the world, and people sometimes can't even tell the difference between us. You know, I'll slap one more illustration and then I'll stop for sure. We have two little dogs, and this one little dog especially, he gets up next to Dad, and Dad is eating on the sofa there, and that little dog goes up and he puts himself right close. He puts his paw on my dad's leg. My dad's eating things, and that dog follows. Well, he first of all he says, he thinks he's Dad's buddy, you know, and he says, what do we have for lunch today? what do we? Now, what do you have for lunch? But he looks at that food. My dad, and boy, he looks hard at that food. He doesn't take his eyes off. He just looks and looks hard. And he gets as close as he can. And his object is to get closer and closer and eat that food. But boy, he's looking hard. But when I take them for walks, they see a squirrel or another dog, and I'll have them both on a leash. And boy, they'll be going at that dog and looking at that dog hard, and I just keep pulling. I walk and the things are tight, and all of a sudden I feel them loosen up. But then it might tighten and then loosen gradually, but pretty soon it's completely loose, and I know they've taken their eyes off of that other dog. Well, boy, you know, it's a matter of the look. What are we looking at today? If we look at the world, it'll draw us in. And the things of earth, the things of heaven, spiritual things, will get dimmer and dimmer. But let us ask the Lord for this year that He might work in us to fix our eyes on eternal things, the things that count, like Abraham. The Lord gave us these things for a reason. He talks about these men and women of faith, that they were different. Well, why don't we be different? Let's make our mark in this world, in this coming year. May the Lord bless His word. Lord, we thank you again for your word, for your salvation, for your goodness. We thank you for the examples of Abraham and others. And Lord, we ask that you would work in us to make us what we should be as Christians, and to fix our eyes on you, on those eternal things, to long as they did for heaven and for you. We praise in Jesus' name. Amen.
Let's see this great illustration. I'm going to be here to call him, but he'll have